Hey guys, welcome back to AFK Discussions. I'm back from vacation. As always, I'm joined by Jason. How's it going, Jason?
Pretty good, man. How's it going?
Dude, it's been a hard week coming back like midweek and having a lot of stuff going on. But we have a special guest today, author, filmmaker, stand-up comedian, Brad C Hodson. Welcome, sir, to AFK Discussions. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, Ty. Thanks to you and Jason for having me on.
No, it's a pleasure, man. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, dude. Brad and I go way back, like the 90s. We went to high school together, and it's going to be so awesome just to catch up and kind of find out what's been going on in his life, because we haven't been really in touch over the past couple of years. I guess, COVID happened, and I don't know, everything just went to crap. So
yeah, that kind of sums it up, I think.
Yeah.
Where'd you guys go to high school at? Is it around Knoxville? You guys went to high school in Knoxville, or
Powell High School?
Pow. You gotta say it like that.
You have to say it like a local Pow. That's everybody always mispronounces everything. That's I always think it's funny. I think Brad Pitt's character in Inglourious Bastards is from Maryville, but he says Maryville, and it's like, oh no, man. Like, that's nobody from around there actually pronounces it. It's Merville.
Right, exactly. It's funny because it's Blount County, but it's spelled Blount, Blount. Yeah. So I can't spell. Forgive me.
My favorite local mispronunciation is in Powell. In Powell, there's a Dante Road, but everybody calls it Daney.
Yeah, I think I may have told you about that, Ty. I have a friend. He's like, yeah, I live off Daney. I was like, dude, I mean, he's not even from Tennessee, but everyone calls it Daney, so he just started calling it Daney. I was like, it's Dante. He's like, I thought that's what it was, but that's the way everyone says it's Daney, so I just went with it.
That's what it is. That's high value PAL education for you, dude. That's what it is.
That's That's what happens when you stop focusing on the humanities.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Do you remember Robert Powers?
Oh yeah.
Robert was one of my favorite people. Robert was Korean. Always wore a big old cowboy hat and listened to gangster rap.
Dude, walking contradictions. I love it, dude. Yeah. That's so awesome.
Great guy, man. Great guy.
I'm really glad, dude, that it's spooky season. This is your season, Brad, man. Spooky season is here. Halloween,
my favorite time of year. My favorite time of year. Just put all the pumpkin spice in my veins.
Right, I'm a sucker for pumpkin spice. People think that it's limited to women, and I'm here to tell you that is not true, sir. I enjoy a good anything pumpkin spice.
Oh man, you got your cinnamon, you got your nutmeg. Like, how can you go wrong?
You can't. And I've been drowning myself in horror movies here, like in the past couple of days. I guess horror, thriller, gore. I've been watching some Rob Zombie movies. I've been watching like House of a Thousand Corpses. I just watched The Witch not too long ago. I've just kind of been. Great. Right. Oh man, the cinematography in that. I said cinematography. That's funny. Yeah, the cinematography in that is absolutely amazing, and the actors are really, really good, and it's a really, really good story, man. I've been really missing some of the horror genre here lately, and it's nice to get back into it, especially during this season.
Yeah, I just watched Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark with my kids, who were probably a little too young for it, and they got thoroughly creeped out. My 6-year-old used to, when he was younger, he loved the "Who Has My Toe" story from the book.
Okay.
And then when that segment came on the movie, he just like immediately ran out of the room and hid in the kitchen until. And then he comes back in. He comes back in with his chest all puffed out, and he's like, "That wasn't scary." I was like,
yeah,
like, you weren't even in the room, man.
He had to regroup. That's all, dude. He just had to regroup.
That's funny, man. Hey, speaking of watching stuff with your kids, we watched A Werewolf at Night. We've actually watched it twice now, and the kids love it. Have you got a chance to see that, Brad?
Oh yeah, that was great. I love. I love how well it captured the feel of an old 1940s Universal horror flick.
Yeah,
from
it
the
was
black
so
and
good.
white atmosphere to just kind of like the slow build. Everyone's sitting around in the room and talking and like trading barbs and until you get up to spoiler alert, Man Thing, which was great.
I love Man Thing so much, and it's just spoiler alert again. Ted, that just cracked me up because I mean that's his name in the comics. I know he was a scientist and he was trying to recreate the super soldier serum and he tried it on himself and became Man Thing. But they're like, Ted, I like your name, Ted. It's awesome.
Yeah, that was great. I'm really looking forward to more Marvel horror because that's what. Well, I mean, you remember this, I'm sure, Jason, like how much we were just all into like Ghost Rider and the Midnight Suns and all of that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The Wesley Snipes Blade. I mean, come on, Wesley Snipes Blade. I mean, I wish he could come back.
That movie is still just one of like the coolest things ever.
Definitely. I mean, it like really defined a genre.
Plus, it's got my one of my favorite lines from any movie in it, and I don't know if you'll have to bleep this or what, but it's at the end when he like just looks at Steven Dorff and he goes, "Man, some motherfucker's always trying to ice skate uphill."
I love it, dude. Yeah, those. And when you were talking about Ghost Rider, are you talking about Nicolas Cage, or are we talking about
the comic books?
Okay. You're talking pre Nicolas Cage. Okay,
yeah, they were very very dark horror comics. They had a real kind of like sometimes like a Tales from the Crypt vibe to them.
Ooh, okay, I like that.
And Nick Cage gets in. He's basically, I don't know. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Nick Cage for being Nick Cage. And the movie's fun, but like he's like doing Elvis or something in it. Like I just remember that whole scene totally. He's like, man, it's like my skull's on fire.
Yeah, dude.
I think my favorite iteration of Ghost Rider so far is in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh yeah, the Robbie Reyes. I haven't seen all of them, but I've watched some clips and like that was pretty badass.
He does a really, really good job. I think that they really, really cover it really well. Especially like it has a more modern vibe to it as well. Yeah. Which makes it more relevant, I feel like, and more relatable. So they did a really good job too with that.
I love Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. If you haven't had a chance to sit down and watch through it, I mean, I just think it's a great series. I know a lot of people give it some hate, but man, I love everything about it. I think it's a great show.
Yeah, I should check it out sometime with the kids. There's just so much, and I say this as someone who grew up on Marvel Comics. Like I remember going to see the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie in the theater and felt like I was watching my best friend on screen. Like that's how much as a kid I read Spider-Man, but like there's so much Marvel I can't keep up anymore.
Yeah, Marvel's such a beast right now. I mean,
yeah,
I still collect some Marvel comics, but I collect a lot of independent books now. There's so many really, really good horror comics I've been collecting. Like Nice House on the Lake. Oh, dude, that's so good. If you haven't had a chance, check it out. It's
really
I
should check that out. Yeah, I was I hadn't read comics in forever, and then I was working at the beginning of the pandemic, adapting a horror novel written by Don Roth. It's a great book, Claire at 16. I was adapting it as a comic book series at Webtoon, and it's been put on hold. I don't know if it'll ever happen or not. But the movie's being shot right now, the film adaptation to Don's book. So I'm hoping maybe when that comes out, the comic book will kick back up because I wrote the first 12 issues and had a lot of fun doing it. There's just something very I don't know, like horror and the comic book medium just mesh so well together.
Yeah, definitely.
They're like dark comics are always like, I feel like there are some characters that are just violent, super violent in nature. And one of those being like Batman, for example, right? Like the very dark Batman comics are really, really good and really, really well written. I really thoroughly enjoy those things.
Yeah.
So speaking of writing, Brad, I'm gonna sort of pick your brain here. I know that Jason's got you here, but while I've got you here, I'm going to take advantage of you.
That's not the first time I heard that, fella.
What are I've been watching so much horror lately. Like, what are some of the key ingredients that, in your personal opinion, that makes a good horror novel or a horror film?
That's a huge question, my friend. The horror genre is it's interesting in that, opposed to, I think, any other genre, there is such a huge umbrella. You take something like The Haunting of Hill House, right?
Oh, I love it. I watched it recently. I love it.
And the novel, the Shirley Jackson novel it's based on, fantastic. The old 1963 black and white film adaptation, The Haunting, directed by Robert Wise, one of my favorite scary movies of all time. But that's such a different film than, say, something like House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yep.
Which is so radically different from the Sam Raimi's The Gift, starring Cate Blanchett, if you've never seen it, or Silence of the Lambs. Like, there's just this huge umbrella of all these radically different types of horror that all fit together. And you can have everything from comedy to splatterpunk to torture porn on one end, and then on the other end you can have a very character-driven, psychological, quiet horror, moody, atmospheric, ghost stories, vampires, werewolves, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, and it's all horror, but it's so radically different from one another that it's hard to say what exactly makes a good horror movie, because or even a horror book, because on the surface you would say, well, it's got to be scary, but that's not always true. Like, a lot of great horror is just fun. You go into it again, whether it's a horror comedy, something like Shaun of the Dead, or Evil Dead 2, or one of my favorite horror flicks of the last couple of years is Ready or Not. Did you see that with Samara Weaving?
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh man, that movie is so much fun. Or Freaky with Vince Vaughn, written by Michael Kennedy.
I did see that. That is very funny. That's a very good one.
But yeah, that's the thing. Like, a lot of horror isn't necessarily meant to even be scary. It's just kind of a fun roller coaster ride. So it's hard to say what truly makes great horror in general. Me personally, what I tend to be drawn to is either something fun, that's just meant to be like a fun ride, or something very character driven, atmospheric, that tends to be dealing with a serious topic, using the horror genre as a way to deal with it. I mean, probably the biggest example of that, and the most famous, is The Shining.
Yep.
Stephen King famously has said that he didn't realize until years after he had published The Shining that he was writing about his own alcoholism and how it was destroying his family. And it's all over that story. You read the book or you watch the movie. I mean, that is what it's about. It's pretty blatant. It's in your face that it's a story about how alcoholism tears a family apart. And one that's always been kind of dear to me. The movies are kind of cheesy, so they don't quite have the impact. I just recently rewatched the 1989 adaptation of Pet Sematary, is what I'm talking about, with one of my best friends, and it doesn't hit you the way the book does. I can't read the book anymore. The book is such a profound and heart-wrenching look at what it's like to lose a child.
Yeah.
And it's a hard read as a result of it. And, the movies, both adaptations, I feel, just kind of lean into the like, oh, there's, basically zombies. Oh, look how dangerous this would be. These cheesy zombies trying to cut you up or whatever,
Right.
But that's not the power of the book. I mean, like, they don't show up for 3/4 of the book. And the book is about dealing with the death of a child. And it's heartbreaking. And it's something that I think the horror genre deals with very well. Harlan Ellison, I think this was Harlan Ellison. I always attribute this quote to him anyway. But once said that the horror genre is a genre that allows us to deal with a topic that we can only deal with through our imagination.
Ooh,
And
that's very interesting. I like that.
yeah, and it's true across the board. I mean, all of the best horror is in some way about loss. Um, horror is often a very sad genre as a result when it's done really well. Um, again, excluding things that are just meant to be fun or funny or kind of, slasher
Yeah,
movies or torture
of
porn or
course.
something.
Sure.
I mean, you look at another great example, again, dealing with the loss of a child, is Anne Rice, Interview with the Vampire. She had lost a daughter, and Claudia, the young girl that Louis and Lestat turn into a vampire, was Anne Rice dealing with the loss of her child, wishing that there was a way that deaf children didn't have to die,
Yeah.
and she put that out on the page. So even when you're talking monsters, vampires, werewolves, and all this, you still kind of get that element in there of us just struggling with this question that's plagued us since we, first crawled down out of the trees. Is why do we have to die? What happens when we die? And when the people closest to us die, how do we go on?
That's such an interesting way to look at it, because I don't think I've ever looked at the horror genre through that lens. Of course, I've always seen horror as it can be funny, and it can tell a story or get to like a certain chord, but I didn't look at it to those depths, right? Like losing the child is probably one of the hardest things that a parent has to go through.
Yeah.
And there's lots more stories being told and about like race and gender and alcoholism and everything like that. So I've never really have taken a microscope to it and looked at it that deeply. But that's very interesting that you brought it up and that your view is that way.
Yeah. Well, and you touched on societal issues too. I mean, I was talking about the personal, but these big kind of social and political issues have always been there in horror also. Probably the most famous recent example is Get Out.
Yes. I love it. Jordan Peele is awesome.
Yeah, fantastic movie, dealing with race in America kind of head on. But excuse me, those kind of big issues have always been there in horror. Going back to Stephen King, one of my favorite books of his is Salem's Lot. And even though it's about vampires and all this, Salem's Lot at its core, he wrote that in the 70s. It was about Richard Nixon's America, like post-Watergate, this kind of small town, like everybody having their secrets and kind of turning on each other and being wary of outsiders and all this. Another great book by King is The Dead Zone, which deals with the idea, again, he wrote this in the 70s, of the kind of like populist politics and politicians that we're getting now that are kind of like have almost like cult-like followings.
Yeah.
And I mean, God, this goes back to Dracula. In many ways, Dracula was kind of the fears of Victorian England about the outsiders that were pouring in. Victorian London was the center of the world, and there was just a massive influx of immigration and all this. And in many ways, Count Dracula represents all of these fears of Victorian society put into this one character, not to mention like the sexuality and everything that's there as well. And that continues on up. Clive Barker, I'm a big fan of his work, and it's rife with depictions of transgressive sexuality. I mean, you had Barker publishing fiction in the early 1980s with openly gay characters. You had things like The Hellbound Heart, which Hellraiser's based on, which is all about the S&M subculture. There's a lot of like kind of agender and transgender kind of identity politics kind of weaved into some of that. And, and this was in the early 80s. And horror in that regard it's always been kind of a genre that allows those questions to be asked and explored years before society as a whole is ready to tackle them.
Yeah.
And I've always found that incredibly engrossing about the genre when it's done well.
Yeah, and it gives people an outlet, right? It gives authors like yourself and filmmakers, and it gives people an outlet to express themselves, and it gives other people outlets to see that expression and to sympathize with it.
Yeah, it's really kind of a mind-opening genre. And it's a shame. I feel like as a genre, it's gotten a bad rep because, again, there's a small piece of it that has kind of become the face of it to outsiders, that it's all just, buxom women being chased through the woods and tortured by a guy in a mask and a machete.
Yeah.
And that's such a small piece of what constitutes horror. I mean, you have writers as diverse as Shirley Jackson, Edith Wharton, Charles Dickens, F. Scott Fitzgerald, who all wrote in the genre. And, but for most people today, I talk to people all the time who are like, oh, I don't like horror. And you're like, oh, why not? And, they'll cite something like Hostel or, a bad Friday the 13th sequel. And don't get me wrong, I love Friday the 13th movies, but I get it.
Right.
And,
I'm a fan of the Hostel movies, honestly.
Yeah. But I get it from an outsider standpoint. If that's not your cup of tea, that's going to be a big turnoff.
Right.
But they think that that's the entire genre. And then you start kind of picking their brain, and you'll find that there's something horror that they love that they never thought of as horror. A lot of people don't think of Silence of the Lambs as horror. A lot of people don't think of Jaws as horror. And Jaws is a quintessential monster movie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But a lot of people don't think of it that way because they think that they don't like the genre. And so therefore this thing that they do like couldn't possibly be part of the genre,
all the way down to the jump scares. I mean, it is. Yeah. It's
the way it builds tension, the gore in Jaws.
Yeah.
I mean,
oh, yeah.
There's a lot going on in Jaws. You can make the argument Jaws is an adventure movie. Jaws is this, Jaws is that. But if you took the horror out of Jaws, it wouldn't be Jaws.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. No, I'm a sucker for a freakishly weird animal. I'm down for Lake Placid, Deep Blue Sea, Antler. I mean, anything like Eight-Legged Freaks. I mean, anything with weird creatures. Like, I'm a creature feature kind of guy. So I know we got deep in the rabbit hole really quickly there, Jason. I didn't mean to ask such a deep question so quickly there.
No. I mean, I have some some stuff to throw in there with it. It's kind of draw it back to how horror hits the hard topics. I don't know if you guys seen Lovecraft Country. That is just incredible. Yeah. Growing up in the South, I didn't really get taught in school about the sundown towns where if you were not white, you were allowed to be pretty much beaten or shot or even, whatever they wanted to do if you were out after sundown. And I didn't even know anything until I watched Lovecraft Country. That's so crazy to think that all this happened and, we weren't taught about it in schools, it seems like something they should teach kids because, it's important to know our history so it doesn't repeat,
Yeah. Well, that's always been a kind of thorn in America's side is we want to pretend that the bad things never happened instead of actually dealing with them because, we're a great country. We have a lot of good we do in the world. We have a lot of good that we're proud of. We're a patriotic people. And so we like to lie to ourselves and pretend that nothing bad ever happened here. And, the horror genre has always been a genre that kind of shines a light on that, even when done in like a tacky way. I mean, how many haunted house movies have as their basis, it was built on a Native American burial ground? Right?
Oh my gosh.
It's such a cliche now, but even though like that wasn't always handled well and is tacky in most of them, that's a kind of represents this kind of underlying stress under our society of what we did to the Native Americans. That we came in and we're like, hey, we're going to push you off your land. And you know what? We give such a little care for you. We're going to build a mall over your cemeteries, Right. And so those kinds of historical sins have always been underlying our in the horror genre in the US too, and probably elsewhere. I mean, I'm sure if you really dig in, again, like I mentioned Dracula or whatever, if you dig into British horror, you dig into French horror, I'm sure you start getting a lot of like echoes of imperialism and things there. I'm not quite as familiar with but I'm sure it's always there in the genre. I mean, you talk about like another good creature feature. Did you ever see The Ghost in the Darkness?
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh, it's so good.
Great movie written by William Goldman. It's got Michael Douglas and Val Kilmer in it. It's based on a true story when the British were in Africa in the late 1800s building a railroad, and these two lions that the locals had named Ghost and Darkness would creep into the camp at night. They had thousands of workers working on this railroad and murder people. They didn't eat them. They just killed them. And they killed hundreds of people before they finally were able to take out these lions. But there's like, that's a true story. That's very cool. But in the context of it being retold with these kind of horror vibes, like you do get that British imperialism of Africa is the stressor there, right? That's everything that's bubbling up in these two lions that are just murdering these guys, laying down the most British imperialistic thing of all that you could imagine, a railroad, across the wilds of Africa.
It's weird how it's like very compartmentalized through generations, right? So like the issues that are at hand at the time, and it's funny that you brought it up about like America not wanting to like deal with their problems. I feel like when the problem happens, they really don't want to deal with it, and then it's later generations realizing the mistakes that the previous generations have made, and trying to raise awareness at the least about the wrongs that were done, but before they became of age to address those issues.
Oh, definitely. And you can see that, you look at the types of horror movies that are popular in the different decades, and you see what people in American society were stressed about. 1950s, giant monster movies with monsters who were born from atomic weapon testing.
Yep.
From Godzilla to them, or they, I forget what it's called, the giant ants. They're just all these movies about our fear of nuclear warfare.
And the race at the time with Russia. Yeah.
Right. And then you get into, like Night of the Living Dead in the late 60s. And, what is a zombie movie if not watching a violent riot take place, know? And all the protests and everything in Vietnam and the racial issues. I mean, race obviously being a big one with Ben, the black character in the film, having to deal with it head on with some of the other characters and then getting shot at the end by the rednecks going around, like, killing zombies that are left over, even though he survives until then. You get into the 70s, we start getting a lot of like possession stuff, this kind of idea of what's going on inside of us.
Right. A big push for religion. Not
just religion, but it's almost echoes of kind of the like the New Age movements and the push toward therapy and psychoanalysis and all this. That we're thinking about like what's happening inside of us. And then you get into the the 1980s, and everything becomes this kind of like first off, you get the satanic panic. Everybody was scared of satanic cults in their neighborhood, and Dungeons and Dragons was making kids worship the devil and all this stuff that everybody was afraid of. And like you talked about, like religion being a big element. And so you start seeing this bubbling up. We start seeing a lot of like demonic things in horror movies. We see a lot of vampire flicks, which what are the key things that you use to fight vampires in vampire movies? Crosses, holy water. all this kind of this push with the religion, as the religious right took power in the 80s over politics and society. And so we kind of see these things like continue to play out. Whatever trends are popular at the box office with the horror genre is it's reflective of what we're dealing with as a society, for good or ill, and the questions we're asking. And it's an incredibly fascinating genre that I can't think personally of another genre that even comes close to being the mirror on society that horror is. I guess maybe comedy would be
that would be my next.
Yeah, you get a lot of satire and stuff, but even then, I mean, you get like kind of the same kind of comedies get made decade to decade. You're always going to have like teenage sex comedies and workplace comedies and this, that, and the other. So even though we do get those satires and stuff, it's not as widespread across the genre as it is with horror being this mirror on our society.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think the latest movie to come out, at least in the comedy genre, I forget the name of it. It's Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence. Don't Look Up.
Don't Look Up.
Oh man, such a good movie.
It was really, really good.
Yeah, such a great way to deal with climate change. I mean, another great recent Leonardo DiCaprio comedy, is Martin Scorsese's Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh man, so good. Yeah,
which again is just us kind of dealing with like, oh my God, this is why our economy is horrible, is because guys like this run it. I'm making less at work and can't afford a house because guys like Jordan Belfort are gaming the system.
Yeah,
and I think my favorite quote from that movie, because I know we've been throwing out a couple of quotes, is he's in front of the entire office and he's got a microphone and he's like, if your wife thinks you're a loser, good, start dialing. If you're about to lose your house, good, start dialing. He goes, I want you to solve your problems by becoming rich. Yeah, as like the whole gaming the system is the way to fix the problem, not the problem.
Oh yeah, and I was going to say, like, what a quintessential American idea, right? Is that like being wealthy is the end all be all. That's going to fix all our problems. And I tell you, man, like living in Los Angeles and working in the entertainment industry, I see that infect so many people. It's just like I will turn my life upside down in the pursuit of money. I will jeopardize my mental health and my relationships in the pursuit of money. Because if I just made 50% more next year, then everything's going to fall into place. And of course it never works out. I mean, unfortunately, I've got people very close to me who think like that and are literally killing themselves internally, to make that extra money, driving themselves into depression and, all this. Cause it's like, I gotta make extra money, and not thinking about how toxic they've made their life and how toxic they've made their jobs in this pursuit of money. And what drives me up the wall with that too, is it's like, I see a lot of younger people doing that.
It's infectious because of like social media and YouTube, and you can get rich at 10 years old. And
this idea that everything you do has to be monetized, that you can't just do something because you love it anymore. You can't have a hobby anymore. It's like, how can I make money off this? I have to monetize this or I feel like a loser. It's kind of how we've set up our culture. And I don't see that going well in the long run.
Right. That's the next horror trope right there. It's the social media era. And I definitely think that it has improved society in some ways and hurt society in many, many others. So it'll be interesting to see kind of like where we go from here as far as that's concerned. I think that social media as a whole, my wife is really into social media, so I kind of start there. My wife's in social media, and she fancies herself an influencer, and every time we do something, like for instance, we went on our 1 year anniversary trip Babe, I know you're listening to this. I love you. We went on our 1 year anniversary trip, and we had to vlog the whole thing. We had to put it on social media, and that's and I'm a little bit older than she is, not much older, but a little bit older. And so for me, social media didn't really kick in until I was like out of high school. Social media really hit her at the end of middle school, right? And so it was important socially when she was younger to have social media and have followers and have these things. And so it's definitely less important to me than it is for her, but I feel like it's so ingrained in her. And not that it's a super, super bad thing, but yeah, it's so ingrained that even on a 1 year anniversary trip, we got to get some viewers out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I've kind of gone the other way. Like I couldn't tell you the last time I actually took a photograph of anything. Like if you go through my phone, I think like the latest photograph is from like 6 weeks ago or something. And so it's like my life, I guess, doesn't exist. And I'm just so bad. And I know I need to be better at social media as a writer, as a performer. It's something I should be utilizing. And I'll go through little stints where I'm like trying to figure something out. I'll be like, I dropped a bunch of weight this year and I was like, oh, well, put some shirtless pics up or some, BS like that. And then I felt like an idiot for it. And then I went through and I deleted them all. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to record some funny videos. And I did that for a little bit. And then I'm like, and I didn't post anything for like a couple of weeks. And it's like, and it's Halloween season. Like I should be putting up like ghost stories and stuff. And I'm just like, I don't really feel like going on.
Right.
So it's just like, I don't know what to do. And none of it makes any sense. Right. Like I'll go on, I have like a great review for a book. Right.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, oh, let me put this review up, or like a blurb by a big name author. When my last novel came out, Josh Mallerman, who wrote Bird Box and Goblin, gave me this fantastic blurb. And, I was all excited. I posted like my cover and put the blurb up and like 100 people like it or something. Right.
Yeah.
And then I recorded this dumb video the other day where it's just me, like it's my face and there's text that just says, Zoom couples therapist who is secretly in love with the wife. And it's just me, like, as a therapist talking to this imaginary couple where I'm just like glowing about the wife. And it's obvious I'm in love with the wife. And it's like 45 seconds long or something. And it's a little funny, but it's not like fall out of my chair hysterical or anything.
Right.
That thing's been viewed like 13,000 times. And I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know what does what anymore.
Yeah. And to be honest, Jason has to pretty much fight me for me to put something on our social media pages. I mean, and this is a good plug, guys. If you are listening, give us some reviews on AFK Discussions on any podcast you're currently listening to. If you like this podcast, you like the guests that we have on this podcast, go ahead and give us a like and a follow. Consider subscribing as well. And I will try my best in the future to put something on our Instagram page.
Hey, and follow me too, people, and tell me if there's anything that I've ever posted that works. I would appreciate that.
I mean, the the thing is about social media is, I mean, you have to be that algorithm, and the only way people see your stuff is if you get more likes, and you get more likes, more follows, more people see your stuff. And it's so hard to get people to follow. I mean, you have people looking at your page. Why don't they just hit the follow button? I mean, it's not going to kill you. It doesn't cost money. Just hit it. I mean, it helps us out,
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. None of it makes sense. I was talking to somebody the other day about someone who does, social media for people for a living. And just like, about like, all right, what do I need to do for my social media? And they were like, well, they quoted me like a package and stuff. And I was like, I don't know if I want to pay for that yet, but they're really good at what they do. But it's just one of those things. And then they were like, well, you really need a different Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok for your book writing. And then another one for your comedy performing, and then another one for, I've been doing like I did a powerlifting meet, and, I'm going to have like an amateur fight coming up and stuff. And they were like, do a different one for that. And I was like, my God, that's just so much stuff. And then you have to like post daily on all of them, And it's just like, I can't do it. Can't do it. Sorry. I tap out.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll be Emily Dickinson, and I'll croak, and maybe people will find my stuff after I die. How about that? Like,
it's so complicated too, because it's like you have to post every day at this time, and if you post every day at this time, then the algorithm's going to notice, hey, he's posting every day this time, so this time we need to push this post to X amount of people. I mean, who's got time to schedule their life around posting stuff?
Yeah. It's just bonkers. It's bonkers. Yeah. And I feel bad for people, like, whether you're talking like fitness influencers or models or like sex workers or whatever, people who have to make a living off their looks, constantly having to do this. Like think about that. Like, your entire identity is tied, not just your identity, but your income, your self-worth, like, to bring it back to that whole thing of like you got to make money off everything now. And like, you're having to be like, well, I gotta post daily of me, me in like, shirtless or in a, if you're a woman, like in a, revealing top or whatever, daily. And it's got to be something different. And I have to always like look in shape and be sexy and blah, blah, blah. It's like, my God, how much that has to just beat the shit out of you internally. Like there's something to be said. I was talking about dropping all this weight, and somebody asked me the other day, they're like, you're going to push it and get a 6-pack? And I was like, no, man, I like food, and the holidays are around the corner. I think I'm going to get fat again. There's so much less pressure. Like, just
right.
Like, let me eat that pumpkin spice dessert, and I'll just chill and click like on somebody else's deadlift video. That's what I'll do.
Go, man. And I think it goes back to like, man, I think some people just enjoy it, right? Like I think like my wife thoroughly just enjoys social media. She likes to post things. She likes to look at things, and
it's
a
dopamine
rush. People, I think for those people it's great, but I think for people like me who kind of missed the boat or was kind of sailed on a canoe before the boat was built, it's not as much of a big deal for me,
I mean, I get it. Like I was talking about like my dumb like shirtless pics when I lost a bunch of weight. Jason and I were talking about this the other day because he was just like, man, like you got in shape. And I was telling him my plan to get out of shape again.
I believe the quote was, "Hey, man, I've been seeing all these beefcake pictures you've been posting."
Yeah, but I get it. Like like I posted like my before and after. Like, here's me 320 pounds. Here's me at 230. And, just like it blew up, like hundreds of likes and all these people like commenting on it. And it's like a dopamine rush, right? Like, you feel good. Like, every time you go on and you look, it's like, oh, more people have said something about my transformation. And I know the hard work I put in, and, and I feel good about it. And then, like I said, like a couple of weeks later, I was like, man, I'm embarrassed. I got all these shirtless pics. And so I went and I deleted them all. Because that's just not who I am, It's like, but I get it. I get that dopamine rush, that you get validation for something, whether it's a photograph you took, whether it's your personal appearance, whether it's something you've written, or an idea you had, and with social media, like when we were kids, everybody was having these ideas constantly anyway. You would have like whatever dumb idea went into your head, like how do I know that the color blue I see is the same color blue you see, right? And when you're young, like you say that drinking a Boone's Farm strawberry daiquiri in your friend's basement, and everybody's just like, oh yeah, good thought. And then you forget about it,
Yeah.
In the modern day, like, you're going to tweet that shit now. Hey, do you guys think that the same color blue you're looking at is the color blue I'm looking at? And then it's going to blow up, and you're going to get like 5,000 likes, and then a bunch of comments, and a bunch of people being like, man, that's a good thought. But then a bunch of people being like, you're a moron. I can't believe you did this. And then some third guy will come in and be like, you obviously have never read Sanford Brenning's groundbreaking paper from 1976 on blah, blah, blah. And it just becomes this like huge thing. That's one of my favorite things whenever like you go on the news, you're watching some story about like, I don't know, like woke culture, snowflakes or whatever. And like, they always show like somebody's tweet that blew up. And it's just like, man, like that's just some random dude saying some dumb thing. And if it wasn't for social media, we would have ignored him.
Exactly.
And now you're putting him on the news as though he's indicative of something in society when he's just basically like your idiot high friend who thought he had a philosophical thought.
That's so crazy. And then I feel like that person then in
We've
turn
really gotten off on a tangent
feels,
here, haven't we?
right,
I know.
feels pressure to keep posting things to try to stay relevant in that moment.
Okay, so just real quick, I'm going to put it in here. We lost Ty for some reason, and if I have to cut it weird and it sounds different, then that's why Ty had to reconnect. So I just letting everyone know this may not make it to the recording, but if it does, you know what happened.
Your boy is back.
All right, so I guess that's a good segue since we had technical difficulties to get onto another topic. So Brad, man, so I saw that you posted something about a new book I think you have coming out, The Love Songs for a Dying World. And that was like, I saw it and I was like, dude, I got to get Brad on the show. What is this book? I need to know more. So I'll let you talk and tell us a little bit about what's going on with you.
I may actually change the title. I'll say that. I've been tinkering around. So, I've been writing short stories for God knows how many years at this point. And, I just have this mountain of short stories, some of which have been published, some haven't been published, etc. And, I had a collection of horror short stories come out in 2019, I believe, called Where Carrion Gods Dance. And I wanted to put something together that wasn't all horror. It might have a couple of horror stories in it, but for the most part, it's more kind of, transgressive, some comedy, etc. And so, so basically I've been putting together this short story collection and continue to monkey with it. I think it was Michelangelo who once said, not the Ninja Turtle, although it would be good if it was the Ninja Turtle. You know what? I'm going to pretend it was the Ninja Turtle. Michelangelo the Ninja Turtle once said, a work of art is never complete. It's merely abandoned. And so I haven't quite gotten to the point where I've abandoned this yet. So I keep like swapping out what stories are in it. And some of the stories I'm like, I want to rewrite that now, blah, blah, blah. But excuse me. But yeah, so anyway, it's a short story collection I'm putting together. But I also hope that there's a novel being released soon. My agent has a stack of them with different publishers right now, and a couple of them are looking pretty good. Like we might be close to something. So I don't know. It's always writing's always just this kind of roller coaster. I've been focused so much on film stuff this year too. It's nice to kind of be pulling my head back toward prose, toward novels and short stories, because I love movies. I mean, don't get me wrong, by any stretch of the imagination. Like, I absolutely love movies, and I love writing them. I love working on them. But man, does it beat you up. From every corner. And,
I can imagine.
And again, talk about the roller coaster. It's just so many ups and downs, and like you think something's going, and it's not even that you think it's going, like it is going. Like you get your first paycheck, and you have a Zoom with a big actor, and like all this, and then just like a month later, for no reason whatsoever, it falls apart.
Yeah.
And it's just you go through that over and over again, and it wears on you, because it's like I have a soft spot for everything I've written. I know some of the stuff I've written. I'm not one of these people who's like, everything I've written is brilliant, because it ain't. Let me tell you, fellas, here's a little secret. There's a lot of shit that I've written. A lot of stuff's not good, but there's a lot that I'm proud of too. But even the stuff that's not good, like there's something about it. Like I wrote it for a reason. It something drew me to it. And so you go through these like roller coasters and these ups and downs with all of them. And it's like constantly having a child that you're trying to get put into, the best school in your neighborhood. And you go in, you meet with the principal, and you meet with the teacher, and the kid loves the place, and everybody loves your kid. And it's like, fill out this form. We got a place for him. And you're like, oh, great. And they're like, hey, he's going to start Monday. And you're like, excellent. And then Sunday night you get a call. Yeah, we decided to give that spot to somebody else.
Oh, man.
Like, what?
Yeah.
It's just, it's just that over and over again. But, so it's nice to be getting back, into dealing with some pros and stuff. But I do have some film projects popping right now that I'm excited about. A couple of horror things actually, and it's looking like 2023's going to be a good year. Knock on wood. Now that I've said that on the podcast, I'll get 3 calls this week that they all got.
Yeah. So is there anything you can talk about, or is it kind of on the down low right now because pre-production and all that?
I don't know what I can talk about and what I can't, so I'm just going to talk.
We love that. We love that.
Yeah. Anything that I haven't signed a non-disclosure about, I always get into this weird thing, like, again, go back to social media. It's like I want to go on and like tweet, like when I got good news or something, but it's like all this stuff you get, like sometimes the movie wants to wait until everybody wants to wait until it's come together, and they want like the first big announcement to be in Variety or something. But what I can tell you is I have a film shooting in Montreal in March called Crisis with director Adam O'Brien. Fantastic director. He just finished a movie called Home with Emily Hampstead from Schitt's Creek, and really great guy. We got a few projects with him, but Crisis starts shooting in Montreal in 2023. And that's a contained horror thriller in one location, and then that's immediately followed up. We basically have a package with him. A couple of films I wrote with a guy I write with sometimes, John Patrizzi. And so that's going to be followed up immediately by a film called Sig Alert, which is another contained thriller. And then our bigger film is a kind of a ghost story with him, and that's called Tingle. So looking forward to that. Also have a slasher film with the director Alejandro Brugues. Alejandro did Juan of the Dead.
Oh, awesome!
That's really
he's
cool.
Most famous for. Yeah, he's got a film coming up on Netflix called The Last Will of Charles Abernathy. So that's something I'm also really excited about. And then we also have a film that's going to be shooting in Knoxville actually in 2023. Here I'll use a Knoxville-ism right here. Good Lord willing and the creek don't rise. We'll be shooting in Knoxville in 2023, based on my first novel, Darling, with director Banner Gwynn. Banner's incredibly talented. He interned with Scorsese and Sidney Pollack, and has basically worked with everybody in the industry. We've got John Hillcoat executive producing. John directed The Road and Lawless, 999.
Oh man, such good films.
Oh yeah,
such good
films. John's been such great help. We're casting the film right now with Lisa Cannon out of Atlanta. Lisa is the casting director for The Walking Dead and a lot of stuff that shoots down there. So we're trying to. I'm hoping we've got the script with a big actor right now that I don't want to say who just yet because I don't want to jinx it. But I'm hoping we're finally getting a yes on this on the actor, and we'll have a nice announcement for that soon. But yeah, like I said, 2023 is shaping up to be pretty good on the film front, provided everything doesn't fall apart for absolutely no reason at the last minute, as it tends to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it's just pushing. I've got, like I said, I've got some novels that my agent's shopping, and just trying to get as much stuff out there as I can. I absolutely love writing, and I have so much stuff, and I want other people to see it. It's I read once, I forget who said this, but a work of art isn't complete until it's shared.
Ooh, okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's just something like about whether it's a book or a short story or a screenplay, I don't feel satisfied with it until I share it with somebody. And sometimes that's all it takes is like having a good friend read it, and you get that feeling. It's like, okay, I was able to share that with someone. And then other times it's like, no. This has to get out there at a bigger level. And so I'm just trying to share as much as I can, because that's the kind of person I am, guys. I'm a sharing person.
You're a sharer.
Yeah. I'm a giving person, and I want to give all this horrible shit that I've written to all of
you. Hey man, I gotta say I'm super excited about Darling. It's one of your books. I'm not a big reader. I don't really have a lot of time to read, and it's an audio book. So guys, those out there who don't read, it's on Audible. You need to go check it out. It is such a good. I can't put into words how good it is. It's really good. And I'm not just saying that because I'm Brad's friend. It's legit an awesome novel. I think I don't want to toot your horn, Brad, but I think there was a quote from I think a Fangoria magazine that kind of said, "Hey, Brad, his writing reminds me of Stephen King," and that seriously, Darling is on par with any Stephen King novel. I swear it is.
Oh, thanks.
It's so good.
Yeah, that Fangoria review was really nice. I was that's one of those, like, you grow up reading Fangoria, and then I wrote my first book, and it's like, oh my god, they reviewed it. Like, it's like, I can die happy. Not really, but I will never be happy when I die. That's spoiler alert for anyone. So don't be anywhere near where my corpse is, because I'm coming back, and I'm coming after all of you.
That's good.
Let me just say that. No, but Darling's a lot of fun. Thank you for the kind words on it. And for anyone in that area, it's very steeped in Appalachian folklore, and particularly the kind of dark history of East Tennessee. Because I don't know if you gentlemen have ever really looked into it, but you would be shocked by the number of serial killers who have been active in East Tennessee.
Really?
Knoxville, for some reason, has had a massive amount of violent, like strangely violent murders. I'm not talking about just like somebody being shot,
right,
or like beaten to death or something, like really strangely violent murders. And so, I kind of weaved a lot of that into the book, trying to be as tasteful with it as I could.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, some of them are more recent than others too. But it's I don't know. It's the Appalachians. It's a weird place. You've got all this storytelling tradition that came over with the Scottish and Irish immigrants who settled into the area. They're bringing their own stories of, black hounds on the moors, and, spectral women, and castles and all this. They brought all this folklore into the area. But then there's just something about just these like dark, the dark hills and the thick woods. And, if you've ever been hiking in the Smokies or someplace like that, on a day where there's not a lot of people out, and it's kind of just maybe you and your buddy.
It's creepy.
Like deep in the woods. No, it's creepy.
It's creepy,
like you feel
man.
like you're being watched.
Yeah, man. It's hills have eyes kind of vibe. I'm to be really honest, especially when the fog is like settled on the mountainside, and you can hear the twigs beneath your boots breaking as you walk down the trails, dude. It's definitely a very spooky vibe. But I got a question, and it's something that I've always kind of been interested in, and I've never had like an author that I could like really just sit down and ask, because I fancy myself a storyteller, right? I have a really hard time putting it down to share with people, but I'm really interested on how do you get these ideas? Where do they come from? For me, a lot of the coolest stories or ideas that I think I've told people for like movies and stuff, and have really come to me. Some are like a combination of dreams mixed with maybe something I've seen recently, or something that I think is really cool. It may be like superpowers or abilities and things like that. But like, how does your think tank work whenever you're writing even a short story? How is that process?
Man, it's all over the place. Like I've got some stories that have started just from where I'm in the shower and the first line pops in my head. There's this short story I wrote years ago called "Breathe," and I was just in the shower and the first line popped in my head. It was uh, in the space between breaths, he saw her, and I was just like, "What does that mean?"
Yeah.
You know, and I had to sit down and write and just figure out like what did that mean, you know, because that intrigued me. I'll get that a lot. I'll have I'll have an interesting idea sometimes too where I know it's something that I want to deal with. It's like I want to write about that, but a story doesn't present itself, and then I'll have a seemingly unrelated idea, and then the two kind of crash into each other,
Okay.
and I'm like, oh, now it's a story. Like I wrote a comedic screenplay recently. It's kind of a Shane Black type of thing about a high-priced call girl who has a new client and he gets murdered. And I was like, you know, I wrote like the first, I don't know, 15 pages or something because like I just really liked her voice and I liked that setup, but I had no idea where it was going to go. And then it just kind of sat there for a while.
Yeah.
And then I had this other idea about a cryptocurrency scam, you know, using crypto as a way to launder money. And then I was like, these are the same story. And once I crashed them together, like I wrote that whole screenplay in like a week or something. And, you know, so I'll get that a lot too. And then sometimes it's just, you know, me dealing with something personal in my life, like whether I realize I'm doing that or not.
Yeah.
You know, I'll just have this drive where I'm like, I got to write about this. One of my most popular short stories, I think it was originally published in 2008. It's called The Other Patrick, and it's about a couple who've lost a child, and their marriage is kind of falling apart because they can't deal with each other. And then, like, you know, it goes off in kind of a supernatural way. And, you know, this whole idea kind of came into my head, and I had to write that. And it wasn't until it was published and people started emailing me about it and how much they loved it and it moved them that I realized I was like, oh, I was working through some stuff writing this story,
Yeah.
you know? And, you know, so that happens a lot. I mean, and like I said, I'm not always aware of it. Sometimes I guess I'm aware of it. I can't say I'm never aware of it.
Right.
Sometimes I'm like, can't stop thinking about something that's occurring in my life. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to put a fictional character through this hell and see what they do with it. But,
Yeah.
you know, but a lot of times it is just kind of that subconscious thing, you know. I was saying to someone the other day that, you know, I think artists are just machines in many ways. I think we take input all day. You know, we take input from our lives. We take input from what we read, what we hear, what we see. And then when we sit down to create, whether that's writing or painting or what have you, we just spew output.
Yeah.
You know, just input, output. And we're not always conscious of how those relate to each other. And I think, you know, a lot of people try to make the whole process almost magical in a way when really I think that's all that's going on. Although, you know, honestly, maybe in that simplicity is where the magic lies. You know, it's just that we can take this input and transform it into an output that we can share and that hopefully other people enjoy and maybe also get something out of. You know, that's my favorite thing with writing. Like I was talking about receiving messages on that short story, for instance, or with my last novel that came out, Life on the 64 Bus. I've gotten a lot of messages. It deals with mental illness. I've gotten a lot of messages from people who are bipolar or have borderline personality disorder, or even, you know, there's one person wrote me who had been struggling with schizophrenia, and they were, you know, they all talked about how the book felt so honest to them, that there was a lot of the things that I had touched on, like anger issues and whatnot, with mental illness that they hadn't seen dealt with in a work of fiction before. And it made them feel seen, you know, it made them feel like they weren't alone. And like, I tell you, like as a writer, there's nothing I love more than that, is to get that correspondence from someone that like, hey, you made me feel this, you know, you made me feel this emotion. You made me feel like I wasn't alone. You made me look at my own life differently. And you know, that may sound pretentious, but I mean, that's one of the things, you know, that's why I was always a reader. You know, the best books That's why I loved movies. The best movies do this. It's that you feel like it moves you in some way, it hits you in some way that lets you kind of look at your life in a different way. Maybe helps you through a bad patch, or gives you an idea of what you need to be doing, or inspires you to something new. And if I can do that with one person in my entire career, then I feel like I've accomplished something.
Yeah, and I feel like that is such a talent, just to be able to intake that information and put it back in the world in a super like useful, consumable, and meaningful way, right? Like I think that's something that I've always been kind of envious, right? Because I always have what I like to think are big ideas, um, and I don't have that kind of talent or knowledge to really try to put that out into the world. I think, of course, it's probably something that you've developed over years and years of practice and hard work, I'm sure. But
Oh yeah, it's a muscle.
yeah,
It's something you have to train, and it's not just learning the craft and learning how to write, learning how to structure a story, and all that. It's priming your brain for it. After years of doing it, when I have an idea, whether it's a first line, or two ideas crashing together to form a plot or whatever, my brain has been trained to the point now where like it automatically just does those steps. I can sit down and write a screenplay, for instance. It used to be like it would take me months to write a screenplay, and I can pound out a first draft really quickly now because I just understand all the basic
right,
story components. That here's the things that need to be happening with the main character. Here's the types of complications they need to go through. Using but, therefore, all these kind of elements that just kind of pour together to make a story. And I'm not saying I'm going to pound out an Oscar-winning screenplay in a week or something.
sure,
It'll be a rough draft. It'll require some work, but it's there. And
right,
it's all just because I've trained that muscle. And I think that's true for anything. You whether you're talking anything creative or athletic, or just a skilled job. The more you do it, the more your brain carves out those pathways
right.
to continue to do it.
Yeah, I think
So
super
all that
interesting.
said, Ty, that's me telling you just sit down and start working that muscle, man.
Yeah, man. That's yeah. It's so interesting, and I definitely think that this is definitely, I think, one of those outlets to try to get my thoughts out there without putting them down. I guess that's the lazy way of doing it, but I definitely think that it would be really cool. And I got a friend of mine. Shout out to Jimmy. My friend James Angle, he's challenged me a couple of times to do some stuff with him, like that, and I've kind of flinched at the opportunity a couple of times. But having someone like you on the podcast and sort of breaking it down is super helpful, not only to me but to listeners out there that really want to um, get into writing or filmmaking. I think that it's a good first step, and good insight into your world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think people tend to mystify the arts. And I think a lot of people in the arts tend to mystify the arts, because, like I said, we don't always know where this stuff comes from. I sit down to write sometimes, and it just comes out. I can tell you where it comes from.
Yeah.
Stephen King always says it feels like he's found a fossil. When he's writing, that there's something that already exists, and he's just uncovering it. He's getting the dirt away,
Right.
which is very similar. I think it might have been Da Vinci who said, when he looked at a piece of marble, he would see a figure trapped in the marble, and he had to carve away all the excess marble to let that figure out. And there's so I think we tend to, as artists, kind of mystify the process, but at the end of the day, I think what it comes down to more than anything is just hard work.
Yeah.
Are you willing to put in the work to do it? And depending on your the way your brain works and your level of talent, that might be more work for some people than it is for others. And I think that can be discouraging, is you look at, some young prodigy that seemingly comes out of nowhere and has like, a masterpiece in their 20s. And, it's discouraging to look at that and be like, oh, well, God, I obviously don't have that.
Right. Right.
But, I always think Dan Simmons, who's a best-selling author, he'd always said that like writing is one of the pursuits where that doesn't matter as much, because who wants to read anything about life written by an 18-year-old?
Oh man, yeah, that's profound, actually.
Yeah, what insight can an 18-year-old give any of us on life? But they haven't been through anything,
right?
Yet, and that's why you see a lot of first novels published by people in their 60s, because you have to have experienced life and be able to reflect on it in order to have any interesting insight in it. Which is all to say, nobody feel like you're in a rush. I know so many people who feel like they got to do it today. It's the hustle culture. Again, like we got to monetize everything we do and blah blah blah. And I got to be making money off of it today. And it's really a pursuit. It's like you got time, man. Like kick back. Have fun with the craft. Learn, get better, make mistakes. Like I said, I've written a lot of horrible stuff, but you have to. You got to get that horrible stuff out of the way so you can get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
And so start getting it down. Like don't worry about it. Don't feel like you're in a race. I had honestly had said to myself when I sold Darling, I was like, I'm going to publish a novel by the time I'm 30. And I shouldn't be saying this because I want people to buy the book and to read it. And Jason was praising it, and I was talking about how much I love the Fangoria book review of it and stuff. If I'd waited 5 years, that would have been a much better book.
Okay. Interesting.
I was rushing. I was like, I set this arbitrary goal for myself. I'm going to publish a novel by the time I'm 30. And looking back on it, I'm just like, why?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean? Like, nobody cares. Like now I have never, ever seen in a review of my work, I've never had anybody say this to my face. Wow, I'm so impressed. You published a novel by the time you were 30. Like, nobody cares.
Right.
That was just pressure I put on myself for no reason whatsoever, because I had some kind of arbitrary time limit in my head that didn't matter.
Yeah. I think theoretically it doesn't matter until the moment that somebody reads it. And until then, you can take your time.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and especially with a book, books can be a time-consuming process. My last novel that came out, Life on the 64 Bus, I wrote the first draft of that in like a fever state. I probably wrote. It was like a 300-page book, 120,000 words, something like that, and I wrote the first draft in 3 months. And it took me 10 years of rewriting that book before I could sell it.
Yeah.
Not continuously. I mean, I would put it in a drawer for, a year, and then I'd come back to it and be like, oh, here's what I did wrong there.
Sure.
Or I'd have a new insight on something. And it's one of those things, if I wrote that book today, it would be a completely different book than the book that was published.
Yeah.
Again, talking about Dan Simmons, one of his first books, I think it was published in like 1982. It was called Song of Kali. And I read an interview with him where he was talking about he still does book readings of that book. Like, he'll be asked to come to a library or a bookstore to read. And while he reads that book that was published 40 years ago, he pulls out a red pen and marks up the pages as to what he would do differently today.
Yeah. I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, right?
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's that quote that I said earlier: "A work of art's never completed; it's merely abandoned."
Yeah.
And I think it's hard to know when to abandon something. But all that's to say, to you and to any other listeners who want to get into writing, don't feel that there's a time limit on it. Don't feel that you're being rushed. You've got all the time in the world. You're Burgess Meredith at the end of that Twilight episode, but before he breaks his glasses, and you have time enough at last. and just take your time, write the book, have fun writing it, have fun writing whatever you're writing, and don't feel the pressure that our culture puts on us for stuff like that. Kind of pressure, I don't think creates good art. I think it's antithetical
Yeah.
to good art. You have to be able to breathe. I think to be able to say what you're trying to say.
Very interesting point of view on that. Very, very interesting. And again, this is the first time I've ever had the chance to get that point of view. So I definitely am going to take that to heart, and I urge our listeners to take that to heart too.
Hey, and if you write something, Ty, I want you to send it to me. I want to read
All
it.
right. I can do that.
All right. Hey, Brad, man, I want to get back into something that probably not a lot of people know about. I mean, I think it's kind of a cult classic, but let's talk about George's Intervention.
George's Intervention, or George, a Zombie Intervention, as the distributor retitled it. Yeah,
it's a classic. I remember. So, Brad, this is one of the first things he did whenever he moved. I think it was right after you moved out to LA, right? Or shortly after?
Yeah, I'd been out here for maybe 2 years, something like that. And I was taking a film class at Los Angeles Valley College, and I met JT Seaton, because he'd always come in with these John Carpenter shirts on. And we became good friends, and JT had directed these fantastic horror short films, and had been wanting to do a feature, and we kind of sat around for a little while kicking around ideas, and came up with this horror comedy idea about some friends who get together to have an intervention for their buddy George, because he's a zombie and he's been eating people. And of course everything goes wrong. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was an ultra low budget film, and I'm always really flattered at the following it's gotten over the years. I mean, I still, just the other day, I randomly, I don't know why I did this. I was like, I Googled it and was like, oh, I wonder, if there's anything new on that. And there's like reviews coming out for it constantly, like people stumbling upon it. There was a book that was released a couple of years back called Horror Movie a Day, I think. And, and it's mostly like big movies, but then there's George's Intervention was one of the movies that was watched. And, and still get like emails and stuff about it. And, it's really flattering, because it's an ultra low budget movie. Like when you watch it, I mean, we had no money. I think the entire thing cost us like $60,000. And, pulled favors left and right and all this. And, but the reviews are always pointing out how funny the script is. And we had a great cast of performers in the film who were really able to nail some of the comedy. And, it's, it's that film will hold a soft spot in my heart for a long time.
It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I remember you had like a kind of a preview for all your homies back here in Knoxville whenever you got finished with it, and it was great.
Yeah, that was fun. I remember that. I was speeding from my friend Brian's house to get to where we were supposed to have it, and I was going way too fast on the interstate because I was running late. And it was raining, and I hit a patch of water, and I did 3 complete turns on the interstate and somehow did not hit another car.
Oh my God.
So, man, when I think of my history with driving, I probably should not be behind the wheel of a car. Anyway, so for anybody out there who's interested in checking it out, George's Intervention, George, a Zombie Intervention is probably how you'll find it. Directed by JT Seaton, written by myself and JT. It stars Lynn Lowry, Carlos Larkin. Carlos is one of the funniest performers I've ever met in my life. Eric Turek, who I'm currently doing sketch comedy with him. Adam Fox, who's also in the film, we're doing sketch with, and my wife Shannon. and who's just such a fantastic actress. Which, I know is like the cliche. It's like, oh, everybody cast their wife, but like JT wouldn't have cast her if she wasn't good. In fact, that's why I married her. She impressed me in a play I saw her in, and I was like, I gotta marry that woman.
There you go.
But yeah, really funny film. John Carius, who is probably most known for being in Poultrygeist. We got some cameos by Lloyd Kaufman and Brink Stevens, and yeah, it's just a fun little flick. I think a lot of the humor definitely works, and yeah, check it out. Let me know, anybody who checks it out, let me know what you think about it.
It's real good, guys. Seriously. If you like campy horror movies, like think the first Evil Dead, I mean, you're going to love it.
Yeah, it's definitely in that vein, like Evil Dead, Shaun of the Dead, but on a shoestring budget.
Yeah. But I think the first Evil Dead was pretty much a shoestring budget also.
Yeah, but we're not Sam Raimi, so
yeah, true. Maybe one day, right?
One day.
Awesome, man. Well, real quick before we leave, I just want to, because you mentioned something about being in the fight. I know you do some mixed martial arts stuff. How's that going right now?
Yeah, so it's kind of been a crazy year. I was in. Well, I won't get into all my like health issues, but like I had some health problems that kind of like derailed some stuff. But I just competed in my first powerlifting meet, and that was fun. And I was gonna fight this month, and then due to some health issues that got canceled on my part, but. I feel like I got one in me. I when I first moved out here, I was training at a Shoot a Box, which I don't know. You guys or some listeners, anybody who follows mixed martial arts, that's where like we had like Shogun Hua training out of there. Vanderlei Silva fought out of Shoot a Box. Kazushi Sakuraba did his stand-up game there. Elvis Sinisic, like all these guys. And fantastic place, and I got so much out of that. But I remember, I when I was training there originally, I broke 3 ribs, which put me out of commission. And when I thought about coming back, there was this kid who was training there. He's from Brazil, and I don't know, he was like 18 or 19. This kid lived in his car, parked at the training facility. He would get up in the morning, come in, train all day, clean the place as recompense for training, train some more, and then go to his car and sleep. And that was his life. And I remember thinking like, oh man, maybe I could fight professionally. And I would watch this kid and I'm like, how do you beat somebody like that?
You don't.
You don't.
That's Khabib in a nutshell, and you just don't beat that guy either.
No, man. They want it so much more than you ever will. Yeah. And that's the key. It's like, and I was getting to the point where it's like, man, I broke my ribs and like, I'm tired of having a headache all the time. Right. Now I got good health insurance. So I'm like, maybe I'll do another one, but but
see, back in the day, Ty, you didn't know this about me, but, Brad and I used to take martial arts together. We, took Kung Fu. We, did some Wallum Kung Fu and a little bit of Jeet Kune Do. And it was great. We used to fight each other all the time. But yeah, that was when we were young and dumb.
Yep.
So,
young and spry.
Yeah. We did you fight in the sand show with us when we all went up to Gatlinburg? And
no, I didn't. I
broke my toe training for that. I remember it's still like on rainy days. I know this is such a cliche. I sound like an old man on a porch. Whenever it's cloudy out, my toe still aches.
I can tell a storm's coming.
There was this dude. What was this guy's name? God, he was just this old redneck dude who wanted to fight with us in the sand show. Was training with us. Man, I wish I could remember his name. Had this big old thick mustache, and he was he's one of these guys who was always just like, man, go hard or go home. never had like a professional fight in his life, right? So we show up at the Sanshao, which for anybody who doesn't know, it's basically like Chinese kickboxing. Like Kung Lee was the big fighter there that day, and so we show up and we're like doing our weigh in and all this and signing up to fight, and they have all the divisions are broken up in tiers, based on your experience level, like how many fights you got under your belt and stuff. And this guy, I wish I could remember this guy's name. He goes up and he's like, I want to be in the top tier, whatever that Kung Lee guy is fighting in. I want to be in that. And they're like, you don't have a professional fight under your belt. You can't do it. And he's like, I'm fighting in that tier. I ain't leaving here if I'm not fighting in that tier. And he wouldn't leave. And they were finally like, whatever. And they signed him up for it. Never had a pro fight in his life. He went in there and like the guy he fought, he went toe to toe with. It went the distance. They had to go to a judge's decision. He lost. But I was just like, man, that's impressive. But just this good old boy, he's like, man, if I'm going to do it, I'm doing it.
Mama ain't raising no bitch.
I think we lost Ty again.
Yeah, we did. Ty on the feet. I think we're going. So I think this recording is against us tonight. Gosh.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know what's going on with this Zencaster tonight. So it kind of reminds me of I listened to this podcast. You were on his show, Tony Merkel, the Professionals. So they were talking this past week about all this weird stuff that's been happening to them when they talk about a certain subject, like something goes wrong with their equipment. And I just listened to that podcast and I'm like, dude, did it affect me too? Like, is this part of it? Cause I'm, I don't know. It's just weirding me out. But anyways. All right, man. Well, dude, it's so good catching up with you, Brad. I mean, we need to do this more often. I wanted to do like ghost stories and stuff, but we kind of went in a whole different direction. So we're going to definitely have to get you back on and have you do some ghost stories because, I mean, this was a great conversation and I think it went all in the right direction that it needed to go, but I want to do more. So we're going to have to get you back on. Yeah, man. Anytime. There's nothing I like doing more than running my mouth. So whenever you guys want to have me on, and hey, and if I get to run my mouth about myself, even better. So
the best, dude, the best.
So yeah. Whenever you guys want me on, just let me know. Yeah, man, it was great catching up, and like I said, we need to stay in touch more often. Yeah. I'm chained to my desk most of the day, so give me a call and we can complain about the good old days. Dude, that's a show all in itself, talking about the good old days. We did some crazy stuff. Oh yeah, the House of Ill Repute. Oh my gosh. that should be that would be its own episode. The House of Ill Repute. You could do that as like an NPR style documentary podcast where we interview everybody who lived there. Dude, yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks for joining us on AFK Discussions. I'm your host, Jason, and this is my buddy, Ty.
Yep. See you guys later. Brad, thank you so much for coming, man.
Hey, thanks again for having me on, guys. It was a blast. Yeah. Hey, guys. Also, subscribe, give us, a review, and make sure it's a 5-star because it helps us out. And also check out Reaper Apparel because those guys are awesome. They've been with us since day one. And if you go to their site, reaperapparel.com, you put in AFK Discussions, you'll get 10% off. So thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time. Peace.